Welcome to the Sheckler Spotlight, where creativity meets purpose and conversation goes deeper. Join host Harrison Sheckler as he sits down with inspiring guests from all walks of life, artists, thinkers, musicians, and everyday heroes, to explore the stories that shape us, uplift us, and connect us. Now here's your host, Harrison Sheckler.
Hi, I'm your host, Harrison Sheckler. Today, we're joined by Cindy Stibbard, a certified divorce and relationship coach, speaker, and host of the Divorce Redefined podcast. Cindy's journey from enduring a high-conflict marriage to becoming a beacon of hope for others is both inspiring and transformative. Drawing from her personal experiences and extensive professional training, she empowers individuals to navigate the complexities of relationships, breakups, and personal growth with clarity and confidence. Through her work, Cindy is redefining the narrative around divorce, turning pain into purpose, and guiding countless individuals toward a more authentic and fulfilling life. The spotlight is now on you. Cindy Stibbard, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Harrison. It's nice to be here.
I'm honored to talk with you today. I'd like to start. What is your background story and your experiences with divorce and how it got you to your profession today?
Yes. Great question. So I am a certified relationship and divorce coach. And so what I really specialize in is helping people decide whether their relationship is savable or whether it's time to part ways. And what inspired me to go down this path of helping people this way was I got divorced myself. And so as part of my journey, I realized that there were so many women who needed some support through the process as well. When I was going through it, I had so many women, acquaintances reach out to me and say, wow, I can't believe you're going through divorce. I would have never known. Like, what are you doing? How did you come to that decision? How are you navigating this? And without really having any real training behind me, I was trying to help them the best way I could. And I realized that there's obviously something that I can do here to really help people. So I went and did my intensive certification in becoming a divorce coach. And I started out with helping them navigate the early stages of the process before they really dive in too deep with legal. And I still do a little bit of that as well. It's divorce consulting to help them figure out what they want before they get taken down the wrong path. But what I realized in the process was there's a huge population of people, women and men, who have been on the fence and in this place of contemplating whether or not they should stay or go for months, if not years. And I feel that so deeply because I was there too. I contemplated leaving my marriage for about 5 years when it was at the all-time worst, in that place of indecision and not sure and just so scared and there's so many moving parts and layers to consider that there's so many people there too, and the more I've worked with people, the more I realize that they are so stuck. And how do I help them find clarity around what's the right decision for them? And even though I'm a divorce coach, I'm also a big advocate of healthy, happy relationships. And so if leaving isn't the right option for you or isn't the right option right now, I would never take you down the path that is not the right one for you. So it's really about coming back to yourself and figuring out what is right for me in this relationship. What do I truly want? What is aligned with me? And then helping people have the empowered the strength to make it from an empowered place and not from an emotional one.
So from your own personal experience, first, how long were you married?
22 years.
So 22 years. And so it was in the last 5 years that it really kind of culminated to this point of where you're starting to realize that this isn't something that I want for the rest of my life. And so those changes, but what were the clear signs that you now reflect on that really weren't this productive, healthy relationship?
Well, I think it goes back to right at the beginning. When I got together with my ex-husband, I feel like I was a shell of myself today. I really had that anxious attachment style where I was so desperate to be chosen by someone, and he represented everything that I didn't have growing up. except, those were all the bells and whistles on the outside, like the material wealth and the affluence. What I didn't realize was that he was emotionally unavailable, just like my father, but cloaked in all of the extra outside things that I didn't see. And so at the beginning of my marriage, I really tried to just be everything he wanted me to be, and went along with so many things that I discovered along the way, indiscretions, times where I distrusted him, and stories that came up that just didn't sit right. But, when you're young and you want to be the great wife and you want to be, the chosen one, and I want to be cool, and I want to be the one that he's like, oh, my wife is the best. We tend to have what's called sometimes betrayal blindness or a selective vision. And because we were building a life and a family and we had 2 kids, there were a lot of things that at the time I chose not to see, and which really only ended up tearing me apart inside, because we never addressed the issues. They just kept going on. And I felt like this was where I had to be because, this is what I married into. And so this was my duty to stay and to raise the kids, until you realize that if you're not dealing with those issues, if you're not really dealing with the emotional disconnect that you have with your partner, you're just showing up on the surface. And some people can do that. Some people can function at a really high level of complete emotional disconnection, as long as they're functioning really well as a partnership. But for me, I needed more than that. And the more I neglected that part of us, the more we fell apart. And also, I found I was with a partner who thought that my happiness, it is, our happiness is our choice, but that he wasn't responsible for any of the ways that I was feeling. So he was not willing to do the work with me. He wasn't willing to do the work on himself. It was all really on me. And at the time, it was more like, well, you don't really need to do therapy because you're not crazy, but maybe you should just, I don't know, go get a job or find yourself a hobby. So we had this sort of emotional disconnect where he just wasn't really seeing what was going on with the 2 of us. And you can only, try to convince your partner to see you for so long before you just feel completely invisible.
So did you have anyone you could lean on during that turmoil? Obviously you probably didn't have a divorce coach at the time, but how did you figure it out?
I feel like I didn't really turn to a lot of people, and that was also something in myself that I've learned to heal from. Is I wasn't one to really ask for help. I was raised in a family where if things were struggling, you put your best game face on and you just keep going. You just ignore it. You brush it under the rug. You show up and do your wife and mother duties, and you just, you keep going because it's just a hard patch. So I didn't really turn outside of my marriage too much to find the help, because I really did feel like something was wrong with me. And so what I did was I started using coping behaviors. I started drinking a lot of wine as a mom, stay-at-home mom. I started, having emotional affairs outside my marriage with men that would give me attention. Nothing that crossed the line physically then, but it was just this need to just feel seen and connected with. And so the biggest thing I've learned now is that when there is that emotional avoidance in a marriage, that is the one thing that can open your relationship up to emotional infidelity, because you just feel so empty. And had we really gone in deep, had I even known, I think, how to communicate what I needed at the time better than what I do now, maybe we could have figured out some kind of repair. But when you're completely disconnected with your partner, and when you're really not willing to hear and see each other, it is a recipe for disaster. A relationship is 2 people, and that's why it's called a relationship. And you need to be able to hold space for what the other person's experiencing. And if you dismiss it, they're going to end up turning away from you, and eventually the relationship will end.
What would you say? You mentioned like therapy, but what would you say the distinction between like a divorce coach and a therapist are, or is there a distinction?
Oh, that's such a great question. And I love that question, because I'm definitely not a therapist, which I love therapists. And I think that we all need that when we want to go and unpack our own patterns and our dysfunction from childhood. It's so important to understand how we show up in adult relationships right now, because how we show up in adult relationships is entirely a reflection of how we were modeled relationships and love as a child. So therapy to me is so important to understand that part of yourself. But coaching Coaching is where I take you from where you're at to where you want to be. And it's more of a transformative experience where I don't, people can be in therapy for years and years on end. I don't want you to be coaching with me for, more than 3 months, really 6 months, because I want to make some real big headway with you now so that you have clarity in terms of what actions you want to take to start to make the changes you need to make now. Regardless of the past history or patterns, we don't need to unpack all of that. It's what I want to do is set some real goals and guidelines, figure out what you want, what you know you're worthy of, what's aligned with your future, and start setting up that roadmap to get you there. It's starting from right here and where you want to go, not where you've been. I hope that makes sense.
No, it does. So if I'm coming to Cindy Stibbard and I'm having problems in my relationship, and generally you work with females, but or what's like the step-by-step process? Like, how do you first approach a client?
Yeah. Well, I do work, I would say 70-30, 70% females and 30% males.
Okay.
And where I start is I've created what's called the relationship audit. And it's a 2-hour deep dive diagnostic assessment where we sit down and we really go through with a fine-tooth comb the 11 core components of what makes a healthy, happy relationship. So it's kind of like, it's like a personality test, but for your relationship. And so what this test does is it really highlights the areas where you're thriving, the areas where you're not, what's broken, what's fixable, where your heart is and where you are emotionally in this relationship, and then what that means for you, and then what you want to do. And so at the end of this diagnostic, this is where, it's not diagnosis in any type of medical term, but I'd call it that because it really does diagnose what issues are going on in your relationship and then what that means for you moving forward. Is it fixable? What areas are there that you can repair and really focus on instead of having this big overarching umbrella, not sure what to really hone in on? And then from there, usually people become super clear with where the relationship stands, where they stand in it, and then what we can do next about it. And so from this relationship audit assessment, people can allow themselves to finally see data-driven results, everything that they've been feeling for so long and why they've been feeling it. And then this allows them to either give them permission to work on what's broken, to give it one last shot, or to look at it and say, I knew this all along. This is how I've been feeling. This is giving me permission that I need to make a different choice. And so then from there, I can support them, whatever path they decide to take.
For some, I'm sure that it's just like a huge weight lifted off their shoulders when they realize, or their beliefs are confirmed, that they knew that deep down they were struggling and it wasn't working. And I think it's a beautiful thing that you're there to help guide them in this process, because what is the stat? Is it 50, like almost 50% of marriages end in divorce or something like that? And maybe it's different with the age groups. You would know more about the percentages, but at least in the US, it's very high, and you're in Canada. It's just everyone knows someone who is going through a divorce, who has gone through a divorce. Yes. I can't imagine that we haven't experienced this, and I've seen divorce in my own family. When these clients, what are the key signals of a relationship that is failing? Mm-hmm. What is the trend that you're seeing with your clients?
What I typically see is an emotional disconnection. Like there has been emotionally disconnection for a long period of time. Mm-hmm. And that just means that couples aren't leaning into each other when conflict happens. They lean out. They start to get defensive. They take everything personal. We start to take offense to our partner's experience and take it personally as if it's our own, and we don't do a really good job of just sit and listen to our partner's experience for the whole purpose of understanding how they feel. Even though we might have been part of their experience, their upset, their anger, whatever, if we listen to how that made them feel instead of what we think we've done or did not do, then we can help help connect with them, take
Mm-hmm.
ourselves out of the equation. And so many of us just jump to the defense and we personalize everything. And, it's like that book of, the Four Agreements. Have you read that book? And one
I
of
have
them
not, but
is,
I know what you're talking about. Yes.
yeah. And one of the rules is don't take things personally. And I think if we can just stop taking everything personally and start listening for the deeper meaning, like that's what our partner is truly asking us for. It's a deeper underlying need that's just not being met. It's not about the dishes in the sink. It's not about the garbage not being taken out, right? It's not about the laundry. It's about, oh, I see, I'm not respecting this space that you like to keep clean and tidy. You feel like I'm maybe not a partner, an equal partner with you because you're doing a lot of work around here. I feel like there's a lot of heavy load on you, and this is how it's coming out. Like really understand, like, where is this coming from underneath? But so many of us are so quick to judge, so quick to defend, so quick to not listen, or we listen to respond instead of listen to understand. And it just causes disconnect. And if we are sharing our feelings with our partner and it doesn't land in a really safe, compassionate space, well, what happens? We don't want to share anymore, right? So we shut down, we stop sharing, we start kind of living in this little confinement, this bubble. We're not being honest, we're losing our authentic self. And when this happens, when there's this emotional disconnect, this is the biggest door that opens up to emotional infidelity, because we just want to tell someone. We just want someone to hear us and see us and explain like how we're feeling. And someone says, oh yeah, me too. I get it. Like my wife or my husband does that to me too. Really? And so this is how we're perpetuating our own relationship problems, is just not like sit in it, listen to it, hear it. Like if it is your fault, own it. And we
Mm-hmm.
need to do more of that.
Yeah. So how can
Yeah.
someone differentiate between normal relationship challenges and like signs that a relationship may not be right for them?
Yes. And so there's so many in terms of like where it's not being right for you. But the first and foremost thing is I always ask my clients, ask yourself, what is the purpose for you being in this relationship? Like
Mm-hmm.
really, what are you here for? This person, are they aligned in your values? Do you have the same goals in mind in terms of what you want out of life? Do you kind of like the same things? Do you cherish the same type of, values? Are you living the same way? Because I think a lot of people get into relationships at the beginning, and when we're young, we base it a lot on chemistry. We base it a lot on potential. And because we're young, we don't know better. We think I've got this great chemistry. We have so much fun. And then you don't see, well, oh, you don't really want, you're not very career driven, and you just want to have this basic job and then sit in the basement and play video games all day. Well, I have a career in mind, or I want children, I want to build a family. And you don't realize these things until you're kind of deep into it, or how you spend money, or how you look at your life together, like how important sex is to each of you. And so when first of all you're misaligned in core values at the beginning, it's really hard to build a relationship or anything solid on sand, right? We need to know that we're in this, we're living the same way, we have the same values. And then secondly, I would say that, what is your future vision with this person? Is
Mm.
this the person that you see yourself, creating that future with when you don't have kids anymore? Are they the person that you are excited to tell your deepest, darkest secrets to because you know that they're safe? When something exciting happens, are they the first person you go to? If something sad or scary or awful happens, are they the person you go to because they have your back? If your partner doesn't have your back, then they're not really your person. And so then what ends up happening is then you start to fall out of love with them. And then this is the last part I say to couples all the time is, you could have everything working. You could have a great working relationship. You handle the kids well, you run the home really well, your finances are great. But if you're not in love with them anymore, and that chemistry and intimacy piece is basically non-existent, you're just friends, you're just roommates, you're just companions. And the difference between a romantic relationship and a companion is the sexual part. And if that's missing, you don't have a romantic relationship anymore. It's okay to end a relationship just based on that alone.
That can be very hard for people to accept, and I'm sure
Yeah.
you've seen that too.
Yes.
It, so, I'm almost 30 years old. I'm single at the moment, but
Okay.
looking for a relationship, I'm open to it, but I would say, okay, I have to put preface. So I come from a very religious background. So I'm sure you see people with very religious backgrounds and they have, they kind of stray away from the divorce word, they're scared of
Yes.
it, but it's
Yes.
just something that's part of life, and we
Yeah.
have to come to grips with it. If a relationship's not working, it's not working. But
Mhm.
me coming from that background, I want to be very careful about approaching any relationship and find someone who has the
Mhm.
same common values before I even, take that step of marriage, right? Of proposing. I have a lot of friends, women and men, who they wanted to get their MRS degree, their Mrs. degree, or their MR degree, in college. It was like something they had to check a box. And I think
Yeah.
when we, for lack of a better word, are flippant with our marriage and our life, I think, like, you said with your own relationship that you're kind of overlooking a bunch of things. And I guess what
Mhm.
I'm trying to say is I would like to be so careful and very detailed oriented about going into a relationship, but I'm also worried that I'm being like confining myself too much. So how do you
Mhm.
balance, finding these values and being
Mhm.
safe in a way of going into a relationship,
Mhm.
but not like putting up walls or barriers? Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. And I think a lot of people can put up walls when they're scared. And
Mm,
so they want to protect themselves. But I think the first and foremost thing to know is that love is a risk that we take with our heart. And
hmm
the only way that we're going to be able to love is if we know that we're going to risk being hurt. And in order to get what we want out of love, we do have to know what we want first. And then we
hmm
can be really clear about what that is with our partner. And if that means, these are my core values and these are the values that I live by, how do they match up with yours? And getting really clear on that at this stage of life. I feel like I'm at a different stage of the game now. Like I'm back dating at almost 50. And so really clear in terms of like what it is that I want
hmm
and what I'm specifically looking for. And to be able to say, sorry, but it's just not working for me if you're not aligned in these ways. Because I do believe that you can find exactly what you want if you're really clear about that and you're not abandoning yourself. And you can be clear about what you want in a very loving and compassionate way. Maybe the person that you're dating isn't really clear yet on what they want. And so giving them time to say, hey, here's what I want. Let's talk about what it is that you want. And maybe once you get clear on that, we can see if we can build something like this together. And it takes one person to sometimes just lead the way, as long as the other person isn't abandoning their own needs and wants because they think that they want to be someone that you want them to be. And think at this stage of life too is finding someone who is a little clear about what it is that they want. And it's easier to build with someone who's also has a sense of individuality than someone who just wants to be a chameleon with you, right? And then we get into that codependent relationship that we don't want because that one doesn't end up working. We don't want to be able to, bend and flex and be what someone else needs us to be. We want to be who we are, and we also want to be what our partner needs us to be too. Does that
So
make sense? That answer your
no,
question?
it's actually very,
Long-winded.
very clear, and I think it's great advice. It's just it's such a heavy topic and
Oh, it
a
is.
lot to think about.
Yeah.
But being intentional, I think, is one of the main things, and then communication is what I'm gathering is
Yeah.
really key. And well, yeah, being open with the communication about what you want from your partner and saying, no, I don't want this, or yes, I do want this. There's so many people, including myself. I've had past relationships where I just wasn't open. Like I dated someone for 2 years, and honestly, it probably should have ended after like a few months. It
Right.
just it was a friendship, but like we were comfortable, but it just wasn't going anywhere. And
Mhm.
now I see that person, and we're just totally different directions, and it would have not, lasted anyways.
Yes.
So just being clear about that, I think that's really good advice. I'm curious, do you see a difference between the way men and women approach some of these steps with you, or their mindset? Is there a clear difference of how they're observing a relationship?
How men and women, when they come to me in terms of like at what
Yeah.
stage? Yeah, very different actually. Men tend to come to me at a stage where the kids are almost grown and flown, right? They're graduated high school or they're almost off to college. And so the man feels like he's kind of done his duty, right?
Hmm.
He's taken care of the family. He's built this little empire. He has the wife and the kids, and he's made sure that everyone's good and everyone's established. And now he can finally look and turn at himself in terms of what it is that he wants. And this is so hard because a lot of times the man is making a decision not because the wife is a terrible person, not because, there's some really big defining factor that has caused him to move on. He's just simply fallen out of love with her. The spark is simply faded. And he feels guilty because as a man, he's supposed to outlive his duty for the rest of his life and take care of his family, right? That's a manly duty. But I also think that we need to start to shift it and look at men also deserve to be happy too. And they also deserve to be okay with the fact that maybe their relationship has just run its course and that he has shown up, he's done his duty. And just because the marriage ended doesn't mean his duty is over. He still is going to perform that duty for that family in just a different designed way for the rest of his life. He's going to take care of those kids. He's going to try to have the best relationship he can with his wife, who's going to also be the co-parent and co-grandparent eventually. And so I find that they're very cognizant about this decision and they take a lot longer to make it. I think men actually are the ones that stay longer than they should. Whereas women come a lot earlier in the stages. They come when things are chaos at home. The kids are small or they're kind of, middle age and everything is on them, including the emotional weight. And the husband is there, but he's working a lot and, she's managing everything at home and she's literally exhausted. And so she feels like she's doing all this by herself. And so she has that point of, why am I doing this with him when I feel like I'm doing this alone? And this spiral that women go through when they are raising young children is they lose who they are. And the couple loses its disconnection because unfortunately, not a lot of us have that support system where, hey, we'll take the kids. Well, you guys go on date nights every week, or you get to go away once a weekend, for a weekend, once a month. So we lose that romantic connection with our partner because it just turns into this constant duty. There's always something, there's always kids, there's always something in the way. And the women become exhausted. They become to this place where they feel like they're both the husband and the wife, except maybe they're not earning the money, but they're doing all the things. And that I can see becomes such a breakdown for women, and they're looking for something else, or they want out. And sometimes women can leave too soon in this phase of life because it's really hard, because instead of having a partner she can lean on, she just wants to push him out. And it's so common because men also don't know what to do in that phase of life. Like, what do you mean? Like, I'm providing for the family. Like, I'm doing the lawn. I'm driving Johnny to soccer on Saturday. Like, what more do you want from me? Right. But what she wants is just like to be seen. She wants to feel like a woman. She wants to feel desired. She wants to feel like she can relax into her softness and he can maybe start to steer the ship. But women also, because we're leaders in the family way, sometimes we can get in the way of ourselves and become over functioners. And then our husbands become under functioners. And this is just what happens. And it leads to breakdown.
So I'm curious with, like, I'm someone who likes to prepare, right? I've kind of set that stage. But even like for women, I've seen women who have had a divorce, but they are having an extremely hard time being, the breadwinner for their family. And, financially, they're struggling. And there's a lot of other things. But what are some like concrete steps, even when you're in, let's say, a successful marriage, that you can take in case something like this would happen, that you have a divorce, or even for men too? What are some of the things that you see?
I mean, I think that there needs to be lots of transparency in a relationship. So,
Hmm.
especially financially, there has to be this understanding of what you have. Financial transparency is a really big important factor. It also dissipates any of the fear that either of you might have in the event that a marriage breaks down. You must know everything that you have access to it. What's the ins and the outs? Like, what are we worth basically here as a couple, and how does it work?
Mm-hmm.
And then also I think it's important to have something joint where you pay all of the combined bills, the mortgage, the things for the kids, but you also need to have your own source of resources or your own money. A woman who hasn't worked, she should have her own bank account. She should have her own credit card. She should be able to be building that credit on her own.
Mm-hmm.
She might not be doing something out of the house to be earning that wealth, but she needs to be able to start to manage some of those family finances through that side of her. So she gets an understanding of what it is, because I see so many women who relationships end and they have no idea. They have no idea how much their bills are. They have no idea how much their mortgage is. They don't know what they have investments. And this comes down to just trying to have those transparent conversations at the beginning. And I was in a situation like this where I was completely, that was not my area. Like, do not ask me what we have because you're supposed to take care of the kids. And I should have looked at that early on. Like, that was a big red flag. When your partner doesn't want to bring you into your financial picture as a couple,
Mm-hmm.
that's not really that safe. It shouldn't be one side should control the other. One might be responsible for a lot of it, but it should never be off limits in terms of what you know. So I think financially, the more you know, the better that you are. The second thing I think is really important, and I know a lot of people are not going to like to hear this because it's not very romantic, but I
think I know what you're going to say.
I do believe in prenups
Mm-hmm.
and cohabitation agreements and postnuptials, because it just creates that level of safety and security. And do it while you're still in love, because you're going to be far more generous with each other in the event this relationship ends up breaking down. And it's kind of like, I look at it as, it's a contract. A marriage is still a contract. And so you should have a contract in place in the event that it doesn't work, right? Kind of like a business. We're
Mm-hmm.
never going to buy a business if we don't know like what happens if it doesn't work out. So a relationship and a marriage is like that. But also I look at it as, it's like when you carry an umbrella. If you carry an umbrella, it's not going to rain. So if you do the prenup, you do the agreement, the likelihood of it actually happening is going to be less, because you're going to know, oh no, we're good. And if we aren't good, I know where my future is going to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I've never thought about it that way, but that it's a good way to go about it. I would say you're convincing me. Yeah, no, that's interesting. What are some of the other issues? So obviously, finances are like one of the main issues. Like you also talked about, there's infidelity and whatnot, but what are like the top 3 issues that we see leading to divorce?
Emotional disconnection, I think, is the
Okay.
biggest one. Communication breakdown. And finances is one of the logical things, but I actually see boredom as one of those things too, is where we become really complacent and bored in our marriage, where we're no longer dating each other. We're no longer making that effort to connect. And so I see a lot of this is that couples are, they're struggling and they say, oh, it's the money, but it's not really the money. Oh, it's the kids, but it's not really the kids. You're just bored. You've literally just stopped investing in each other. You've stopped dating each other. You stopped being affectionate. You stopped making sure that your relationship comes first.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the biggest thing is we can't stop what we did at the beginning, because if we do that, then it will end. We have to just keep on doing that. And I know it takes effort and it's hard, but if we do it intentionally, then we're going to maintain that connection.
So what are some of those things that we can do to like rekindle that spark? Or like what advice have you given your own clients that you've seen that's like paid off and really worked for them?
Yeah, I think 2 simple things. One, tell them what you're grateful for, like on a daily basis. I'm really grateful that you did A, B, and C today. I'm really grateful that you said this to me. I'm really grateful that, you're so helpful around the house. Show them you're grateful. Tell them that. And 3, be affectionate.
Mm.
touch, hold hands, hug. And I'm not saying like it needs to go as far as having sex. It doesn't. But there's so much that can be said with you're cooking over the sink and your partner comes up and gives you a hug, from behind, or just says, like, wow, you just made an amazing dinner tonight. I really appreciate that. Or it's been so nice just cuddling with you here on the couch. Like we don't do the smallest things, and it's the smallest things that end up causing the biggest rifts. I don't need you to take me on vacation or buy me a fancy bag. I need you to appreciate like what I'm doing and just give me that extra cuddle at night when I'm not feeling so connected to you. That's it. That is
Well,
literally it.
well, it's kind of like financial investing. You put in a little bit over time and it has compound interest, So maybe that's the same way thinking you're doing these little things that some people may take for granted. But I think over time it builds that trust and that love between your partner.
Totally.
I don't know. This is a lot of thoughts are going through my head right now with relationships. So I appreciate you, sharing this advice, and then also uh, guiding me along this conversation, because this is kind of like um, uncharted waters for me, especially, because I haven't been in too many relationships, but it's fascinating to say the least. Um,
Yeah.
so when people, let's say they've gone through the divorce
Mhm.
and they have things settled and they're in a good place, but they want to re-enter the dating field. Do you help
Mhm.
people with that too, post divorce and like wanting to dive into relationships after that
Yeah.
experience?
Yeah, I definitely help them with that too. In terms of like just regaining your self-worth and your
Hmm.
self-identity. Because I think what can happen a lot of times too quickly is that we don't take the time to truly get to know ourselves after a long-term relationship has broken down.
Hmm.
And even if you've been left, doesn't mean that you don't have things to work on too. Or even if you left a relationship that doesn't work, doesn't mean that you don't have things to work on. So I think that a lot of times we aren't comfortable with that feeling of being alone, and we get lonely really quickly because we're used to being in a relationship, and humans are wired for connection. That the way that we get over a relationship is to get into another one. And I think we're just using a human as a band-aid. And we can't use a human as a band-aid because we're not getting ourselves any better, any stronger. We're not knowing ourselves anymore. And so if you have been in a long-term relationship, the best thing you can do for yourself is to actually allow yourself to be alone for a certain amount of time. And there's going to be the time at the beginning that's really hard because you're lonely,
Hmm.
but trust me, push through the loneliness until it becomes solitude and you become really comfortable with you. And now you can be clear about, okay, I'm comfortable with me in this relationship with myself and being fully alone. Now I'm ready to open myself up so I can share my already full life with someone else, because not that I need to, it's because I want to. And once you're able to do that, once you're really able to be super comfortable on your own, anyone you open the door to is just going to be an add to your life. And then you'll notice too, if it doesn't work, it's not going to crush you. It's not going to break you like maybe the first one did, because you're actually good. You're good on your own, and you know it because you've given yourself time to really learn that. And a relationship is just a lesson in terms of, okay, what did I choose that maybe wasn't so right for me this time? Or what didn't work there that I can learn from the next time? And know that nothing lasts forever, right? The only certainty we have in this life is death. And so
Hmm.
just know that going into every relationship is just a lesson of what can I learn about myself in this process? And don't jump too soon, because yes, we want human connection. Yes, we want to be with someone, but not at the expense of just filling that void of loneliness, because that's not worth it. That's not choosing the right person for you. That's just getting yourself into another pattern, picking the same kind of partner, but in, different clothes. So to me, that's where we have to really look at, what did I learn from this long-term relationship that I really need to focus on changing about myself so I can show up better in the next relationship, even if the breakdown of this relationship wasn't entirely my fault. And I promise you, you're going to be so much more solid in who you are. You're going to be so much more confident. You're going to be able to exude that kind of presence and energetic attraction that you deserve, instead of looking at for someone to desperation or just filling a void, or you're not going to settle for less than you deserve that way.
That is really valuable advice. And I think taking every opportunity as a learning opportunity is huge. We go through life and we take a lot for granted, um, our struggles for granted,
Mhm.
and we don't really take time to reflect. And so I think that's really valuable advice saying that you need to take time, because I've seen so many people, like you were saying, in this constant circle of they're in a relationship, then they're out. And then a week later, I'm exaggerating, but
Yeah,
they're in a
no.
relation. It could be a week later, honestly, but it and they don't understand why they keep cycling. They're
Yeah,
in this constant spiral, but it's because they're not concentrating. Well, they're not examining what the mistakes were that led them on this path, and they're just not taking time for themselves because they don't really know who they are. They're
right.
codependent on someone, and that is their persona. Um,
Yeah.
I see couples where I don't know what's going on in their home, but you see on the outside and you're like, I mean, it's great that they're super together, but sometimes one is more dominant than the other, I guess to
Yes.
say, and it
Yeah.
feels like the other just doesn't even have a personality, if that
Right.
makes sense. And it's
Because they become so enmeshed in the other person. Yeah.
exactly. And so then it makes you wonder, wow, if so and so, divorced, where would that go? How would they succeed? Because they don't have that own individual personality. They don't have themselves figured out. And just come back to it. Yes, you have to take time for yourself. But I'm curious though, with your clients, what is that time frame? I mean, is it some people need years? Do some people need a year or a few months? Like, what does that look like?
I mean, everyone has their own philosophy about it. I feel personally that if you've been in a long-term relationship for quite a number of years, you need
Hmm.
at least a minimum of 1 year on your own to really
One
figure
year.
yourself out. One
Okay.
one year is nothing on the grand scheme of things because you're really starting to unattach yourself and detach yourself from this person and who you were with this person. Like, what do I believe in now? What are my passions? How do I handle things? How do I view the world? Like, who am I? What brings me joy? And it takes time to really get to know that part of you so that you
Hmm.
can be really comfortable with knowing who you are. And it does take about a year to really get to that place where you're pushing through the loneliness because the loneliness is going to be hurting you for the first 3 to 6 months. If you're so sad, you're so by yourself, you're so lonely, but push through it. And once you get through that part, that loneliness turns into solitude. And that solitude is almost strength, where you start to be like, kind of like my Thursday night to myself. I kind of like that yoga class that I go to. And now I know that I don't have to answer to anybody and I get to live my life on my terms. So when I want to have another relationship where I date, this is what's really important to me now. And so
Hmm.
these are the things that I need in my life to be my individual self. Because I think a lot of people too can feel like, oh, my relationship is so great because we're like best friends and we do everything together and we never have time apart. No, that is terrible. That is a complete codependent relationship. I love that you guys are best friends, but even best friends do things apart.
Exactly. Oh my
Even
gosh,
best
yes.
friends have their own individual lives. And in order for relationships to truly thrive, you need to have two individual people coming together to create a common bond. And what keeps it interesting is that you are who you are. You have your own interests. I am who I am. I have my own interests. We have some interests together, but there's a healthy amount of separateness in our
Hmm.
relationship. So that if I was ever to lose you, I didn't lose myself in the process because myself wasn't attached to another person. I still have me. Yes, it's sad I lost you and our connection, but I didn't lose myself. And the people who don't take the time to really do this work in between relationships don't make that sort of distinction. And so the people who take divorce and breakups the worst, like, oh my God, my life is over and I'm never going to meet anyone again. And you've ruined it and I'll never get over you and I can't move on. It's because they've literally enmeshed themselves into the identity of someone else at the expense of themselves. They don't know who they are. And so we really want to know who we are. And you don't have to be healed. I also believe that a fully healed person, you can't really ever be fully healed, but you can be healing in a
Hmm.
relationship. But unless you try to get back into a relationship with all these kind of healing experiences and skills you have, that's where you learn whether it's working or not, because these are relational skills. We don't know if they're working unless we're in a relationship. So heal, but you can also heal beside someone who's holding space for you to heal and who's also doing their own healing at the same time.
It's okay to have scars, it just kind of
Oh,
shows us
yeah.
what we've gone through and the struggles that we've overcome.
Yeah.
Um, so when you went down this path of becoming a divorce coach, what were some of your friends and family members' opinions on this? I mean, that's not a
Oh,
traditional
yeah.
life path. I'm curious.
No. And I mean, when I was first doing my training as a divorce coach, oh my gosh, I think all my friends and family were like, what are you doing? Like, I remember I was sitting down and talking to my girlfriends about like what I was going to name my practice. And they're like, well, as long as you don't name it anything having to do with divorce, like name it Highway to Happiness or something, right?
We're
Like,
just going to mask this? Come on.
yes,
Yeah.
don't say the word. Don't say the words. But so that's when I realized I had to actually just say the hard thing. Divorce is divorce. And I know a lot of people couldn't say it. I couldn't say it, even though I was choosing it at the beginning. I had to talk about that I was being separated and not divorced. So there's so much false weight that goes along with the meaning of that word, because it really doesn't mean anything unless we give it meaning. It just means you're breaking up at the same time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I remember trying to, name my podcast, and I called it Divorce Redefined. And everyone's like, you shouldn't use that word. And I'm like, I'm using the word because I need people to like get uncomfortable. And I think ever since, the hardest thing for, I think, my friends and family who have come to embrace, because I've embraced it, is I really like to get people reasonably uncomfortable, because I know that's where growth lies. That's where it is. And so if you follow my Instagram, you will see that I post some very controversial, very confronting topics sometimes that really piss people off. And I get followers that reach out and like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like, they're going off on you on that post. And I kind of feel like, yeah, like I hope they are, because this is the kind of opening up that I want people to feel. So if I've activated you, I'm doing my job. If you're just scrolling past and okay, that was boring. Well, I'm not doing my job to really open things up. And I like to talk about the hard things. I like to talk about, a different aspect of relationships or affairs or anything, just to get people to think, not to say I'm on one side or the other, but I'm on the side of, let's crack this open. Let's get curious. Let's ask questions. Let's be like, why does that bother me so much? That's what I love. And I think that's where we can really learn and grow and show up better in relationships.
Well, I think truth is one of the most entertaining things, because it's full of drama. It's full of things that we don't want to hear most of the time, because, I mean, truth is scary. And so when you're putting
scary.
those, you're poking the bear, and you're putting these, social media posts out there, it resonates with the person. And there's so much out there that's just clutter, honestly. And I think people don't really resonate with it. But honestly, the people who are successful are really putting themselves out there and being vulnerable. And I think that's a lesson, not just for, trying to get your message across, but relationships. When you are vulnerable, in a way, it can be more attractive. In a way, I guess if that's the right mindset. I'm just trying to equate it to all of life. Vulnerability is not a bad thing. It can be a good thing. And like you said, it leads to growth, which is huge. It's huge. Yeah.
And I think vulnerability is where strength is. And if you can be vulnerable and you can share, and anyone who follows me on Instagram, of course, knows that I'm an open book. I'm not afraid to share anything. I'm not afraid to share all of my past mistakes and errors, because I'm comfortable with the versions of myself that have grown and evolved and then died and then rebirthed and then evolved and grown again, because that's part of who I am today. I'm no longer those versions of myself once. And those mistakes I've made sure that they aren't, they're lessons, because I haven't chosen to make those same mistakes again. And so that's the difference between, that's growth, right? Is when a mistake is only a mistake when it happens once. Otherwise it's a choice. And so when you keep growing in these lessons, I want people to see like, I'm raw. I'm flawed. I've made mistakes, but we can grow and we can learn from it. And I feel stronger and better because of it. I can better be a parent. I can better be a friend. I can better be a partner because I get it. I get you. I hold, there's no judgment for anything that you're going through because it's just love. We all make mistakes. We all have to grow through this journey. And the more vulnerable you are, the more you can start to forgive yourself for the versions of yourself that and the mistakes that maybe you wish you didn't do. And the stronger we can get because of it. And I think it's beautiful when people can be vulnerable, when they can own their mistakes, when they can push through it. Like there's nothing more attractive than that, where someone could just be like, yeah, I fucked up big time. And here's how I've changed because of it.
So bringing it back to your friends and family, have they seen that growth in you? And
Yeah.
have you brought them into your circle and be like, hey, it works. Okay. You just had to give me some time.
Yes, they definitely have. And I think that they're all like very proud. And, there's still moments where like my friends won't like my Instagram post just in case someone thinks they're getting a divorce or something. And I'm like, I know, I get it.
Oh, that's funny.
But I think, I'm that confronting voice that a lot of people aren't because they're just not there. And I think you always need to have that one friend, right? That one family member, that one person who is always willing to go there in those hard moments. Because if you don't have that person and you're not that person, then it's hard to grow from there. But I still know that what I do and what I speak and how I talk about my feelings makes people uncomfortable, but I'm totally comfortable with that.
Well, I think you're helping people, we need that
Thank you.
healing, and it's honestly just beautiful. So, thank you for what you do. What's
Thank
the
you.
reception online, Ben? I know you said that people have been, messaging and following you and saying, "Oh, I'm sorry you're getting attacked." But what about some of the stories with your clients, and then also, yeah, the attention you've been getting? What positive reinforcement have you heard?
Yeah, I mean, those are the odd posts, right? Of people trying to protect me, I think, because I do have a very, very loyal and amazing following. And
Yeah,
I feel that there are more voices that I'm speaking to than I am that's offending. You know what I mean? And I feel
sure.
like the people who are angry are the loudest voices, and the ones that are there being like, oh my God, she sees me, she's saying what I need. They're still scared to speak up. But I get so much feedback from people saying, oh my God, like everything you just said, like just nailed it on the head for me. Everything you just said is exactly how I'm feeling. I get that all the time. And that's how I know I'm resonating with people, that I get what you're going through. Like I feel it. I mean, I've been there for the most part for a lot of this. So, I mean, I feel your heart. I get the hardness and the journey and the fear and all the things. And I think because I can really dig deep into my own experience and share that, it allows people to, and share it in a way that's really vulnerable and confronting, then people feel like they're no longer alone. And that's just it. I want people to know that, you're not crazy over there. You're not by yourself. Like you're not flawed. There's nothing wrong with you because things aren't going right, or that you've done this or you're experiencing this. Like we're all just humans leading each other home at the end of the day, right? And so if I can show up and just hold space for people who want to be heard and are just going through the messiness of life, then I feel like I'm doing my job. And I mean, I'm healing and growing still along with everyone else in this process. And I think we're just doing that together. So I love my following. They're nothing but just amazing, amazing community that I have built and that I've created. And I'm so grateful for them, because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. So there's just so much wonderful things every now and then. And you know what? If you don't have a couple of haters here and there, then you really haven't made it, have you? Anyways.
No, I think that's a very good point too. You always got to put yourself out there.
Yeah.
Um, so if someone wants to get in contact with you, or one, just follow your social media and everything, where
Yeah.
should they go? And then also, secondly, if someone wants to be like a client, maybe
Yes.
what are some of the first steps that they need to think about before addressing, reaching out to you or another divorce coach?
Yeah, I think the best place to follow me would be at Cindy Stibbard, Cindy.Stibbard on Instagram.
Hmm.
And then my website is www.cindystibbard.com. On there, it shows you kind of the different capacities that I can support people. And then on Instagram, there's always a call to action in my bio. There's just book a quick 15-minute call to talk about the relationship audit, if that's something that you want to do to see what your relationship is at. I also offer a 30-minute consultation if you feel like, okay, I am getting divorced and I really want to figure out what to do next. There's lots of ways that I can connect and support you. And just either if it's not with me, then I'll help lead you in the right direction of where the right support is for you.
Fabulous. Well, I'll be sure to have all the links and everything in the episodes that people can get in touch and follow all the great things that you're doing. We're coming to the end of our podcast. And one of the things I do with every guest is I do a rapid fire round of questions for 1 minute. So, okay. Cindy, are you ready for this challenge?
Yes.
Okay. Let me get my timer. And it's always kind of funny to see what people's answers, because like I've said to others, some people are really good at short answers, and others, well, they'll have a 1 question, 1 minute round because they really like to expound. So however you want to answer, these are fine. So here's our timer. We're going to start. Okay. You ready?
Yes.
Okay, here we go. Okay, what is something you must have during your morning routine?
Coffee.
Favorite book that changed your perspective?
Untamed by Glennon Doyle.
What's one word to describe your coaching style?
Raw.
Most rewarding aspect of your work?
Making an impact on people's lives.
What's a misconception about divorce you'd like to debunk?
It's not the end of your life. It just might be the beginning.
And what is a go-to self-care practice?
Wine.
Red or white? Red or white?
Red. Well, white before 4 o'clock and red after 4.
Touche. Okay. What's an essential quality in a healthy relationship? Just one thing.
Trust.
Trust. And what's a hobby that brings you joy?
Tennis.
Tennis. Oh, yeah. Okay, great. Well, that's our 1 minute. That was enlightening. I always like to have these little questions because it brings fun. It's fun, and it brings up things that you might not know about a person. Now I have a billion other questions in my head. So that's awesome. Well, Cindy, this has been a pleasure getting to hear your story, all the great things that you're doing, and just helping people, because it's such a difficult time in anyone's life, and situationally dealing with divorce. I mean, there's a lot of commonality between it, but everyone's story, I think, is kind of unique. But to have someone they can go to and be guided through the process is huge. So again, from me and my listeners, thank you for your time and your valuable advice. I really appreciate you.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure being here. Such an honor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Sheckler Spotlight with your host, Harrison Sheckler. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, follow, and share the show with a friend. New conversations drop regularly, so stay tuned. And thanks again for listening and being a part of the journey. Follow Harrison Sheckler on social media and visit harrisonsheckler.com to learn more.